had talked about how there's a fairly good showing from the administration here at the Milken Conference this year. As David mentioned, you're a member of President Trump's Strategic Policy Forum that meets quarterly. Give us a little bit of a sense of what your discussions with the president are in Washington versus what you've heard from the administration here.
So it's pretty consistent in the messaging, I would say. It's a great opportunity, Scarlet. There's 17 of us who sit around a table with the economic team and the president. And what I really get a sense of, the president is very outcome-oriented, very engaged in the issues, active in, he sets the agenda with Steve Schwartzman, who kind of is the chair for the private sector, and we know what's going to be talked about. And we all come in prepared to share our really honest views, and none of the CEOs are afraid to disagree, and it's actually a good environment to be able to exchange ideas.
So what's interesting with your past, of course, is that you also served President Obama, advised him, and before that, Presidents Bush and Presidents Clinton. So
I'm confused, Scarlett. No, you're saying right.
Certainly you're bipartisan. We'll go with that. Give us, compare and contrast this president and his approach versus those of his predecessors.
Well, this is a unique time, right? You have a new president who's never been in elected office, and he doesn't have his cabinet filled out. So he's getting using us, along with the economic team, I think, as a real sounding board. I hope that continues once the cabinet roles are all filled, and most of the major decision-making will gravitate out towards some of those cabinets. But I would say one real positive is a really outcome-focused discussion, not just action, not just let's talk. There's a sense of urgency that's really driving a lot of the decision-making, and high level of engagement.
High level of engagement, but outcome-oriented. Does that mean things like nuance get missed out, get lost?
I'm sorry?
Does nuance get lost in the process?
No, I mean, obviously we have 2 hours. The president is asking questions during the whole time, so very engaged. Nuances are there, but we're not crafting legislation sitting in those rooms. We're responding to how will a policy affect you? Is this going to work? Is it not going to work? Give me some ideas on how we can create jobs. It's really focused around job creation almost every single meeting and every discussion.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about taxes, because the president had told Bloomberg News yesterday that he's willing to raise the U.S. gas tax in order to fund infrastructure development. And of course, infrastructure is something that's out there. It hasn't really been addressed in detail yet by the administration. Do you think something like a gas tax would get support from Congress in Washington? You've been there since 1989. Is this something that would gain traction?
It's really, you never know until you try and run it through the system, right? I will tell you that the desire to get infrastructure done, the importance of it to this country, the jobs it will create, the freedom of mobility from urban to rural and back will be much expanded. Infrastructure is much more than roads and bridges. It's also broadband and things. I think there's such a big desire for that. When you have such a need, you expand your mind and opportunities, and you look for ways to find the resources to do it. I think everything will be on the table, including a gas tax.
And this is something that Democrats can get on board with as well?
Democrats are very much on board with infrastructure spending and the need to do it. And so I think this could be a very bipartisan issue.
All right. The president also told Bloomberg, or he really repeated his calls for a reciprocal tax and wanting to level the playing field between U.S. companies and international competitors. How do you interpret that? Does that mean we could see a tariff as opposed to a border-adjusted tax?
Well, I think the reciprocal tax, from best I can tell from the way that's discussed, is actually more targeted to a situation where there's a specific high tax on U.S. goods or products in return for that, not a broad-based border tax or not a broad-based tariff. At best I can tell, that's almost a trade issue as opposed to where the president's going on taxes, which is really around lowering the corporate rates, lowering the individual rates, and moving to a more international system that doesn't impinge companies bringing their money back.
All right, well, speaking of the individual side, the Trump tax plan also says it will do away with deductions for the wealthy, but so far what we've seen from the administration is eliminating the deduction for state and local taxes. And the White House says it will protect mortgage and charitable deductions as well. So what else is the administration considering taking away on the individual side?
Well, remember what is part of the plan, though, as well. The president is talking about doubling the standard deduction. Right now, 70% of Americans don't even take an itemized deduction. When you double it to where the president's talking about 80% of the people in America won't even get any standard deduction because they don't need to. You don't have enough deductions or credit to exceed that amount. For those upper income people who do, what he's saying is for a lower rate cut, we're going to have to take away some of those cuts and incentives and benefits you already have today, so it's more fiscally responsible. And they're all going to be on the table because the president wants to get, you can tell from his plan, the rates as low as he possibly could for both corporations and individuals.
What do you think of this idea to lower the tax for pass-throughs? The pushback, of course, is that everyone's going to go out there and become a limited liability corporation.
Yeah, so there's going to have to be a lot of protections put in place. When the individual top rate is far away from the rate that could be the pass-through business income rate, there's going to be a lot of movement to take all your income and say it's not individual income, it's business income at a lower rate. So they're going to come up with protections and rules that will prevent businesses from doing that, and that's all part of the legislative process.
From where you sit, do you think we'll get a tax bill signed by the end of this year?
I'm hopeful. I really am. I think the president really wants to get this done. He signaled it's a big priority. Congress wants to get it done. He put out his principles. Now they're going to work through the two systems. The real hard part in this one is the process.
Right.
You know, there's not a lot of days left, and they're trying to get health care done. They got to get the debt limit done. They got to get the budget bill now that they finally agreed to extend it. They got to get confirmations done. It's all a matter of shelf space. So as long as they keep it a number one priority, Scarlet, I think we're going to get it done.
The to-do list is pretty huge, as you mentioned. But my question also is, when it comes to tax change, will any of the tax changes be temporary or permanent? Because there's a whole big issue with the offset.
Yeah, so there's no such thing, in my view, as a permanent tax anymore. I mean, when different members of presidents come in, different administrations come in, they go in different directions. The desire for business in particular to have permanency is because the planning cycle is so long. You want to have as permanent as possible. To me, 10 years is a long time. If you can get a tax provision there for 10 years, that would be saying a lot, because, again, the next administration could come in and actually take it away. That'll be part of the battle, and whether or not, if it has a cost in the out years where the deficit would be too high, then it's going to have to be temporary. If they can offset the cost with deductions and credits, taking those away, as you were talking about, then it could be permanent. I don't think they're going to be able to know the answer to that until they work through the system and see where the politics are.
All right, Mark, final question to you. We started off by talking about how this president is fixated on creating jobs in the United States. I know that here at Milken, you're on a panel talking about the workforce of the future. What will jobs at EY look like in 5 years and 10 years?
So it's a great question. And really, you know, we hire 63,000 people a year. We have 250,000 people. We now have 370 robots. And they're working side by side. I think you're going to see work become less jobs, and it's going to be disaggregated into work. And individuals will actually still need their judgment, their skills, their knowledge, but they're going to have robots and technology alongside of them that will do a lot of the repetitive work. And so in some ways, it's upskilling. And I think it's going to be an exciting time.
I like that.